Hello and welcome. I'm John Sal, the Director of Music Ministries here at Abington Presbyterian Church. This February Tuesday noon recital series, which is presented in partnership with the Philadelphia chapter of the American Guild of Organists, is something we are delighted to be able to offer again. I'm delighted today to welcome Rich Spots. I'm excited to share a wonderful program that he has prepared with you, and I also look forward to each of the coming weeks. You can find the whole list here on the website and know that each Tuesday at noon we'll be making these available as a live premiere, hoping that you can enjoy them then or perhaps a bit later in the day if that's what your schedule requires. With my thanks to Rich, my thanks to each of our performers, including Andy Heller next week, and especially to our faithful friends and fans of this month of organ recitals and to all of the Music at Abington programs. We bid you welcome. Thank you for listening and sharing this with others who want and need music at this time. And we look forward to being together throughout February and in upcoming events in person as possible.
Hello, my name is Rich Spots, and I would like to thank Abington Presbyterian Church and the Philadelphia chapter of the American Guild of Organists for inviting me to participate in this Tuesday noontime recital series. I specialize in the organ works of Charles Tournemire, in particular his magnum opus, L'Orgue Mystique. Born in 1870, Charles Tournemire was a French organist who served at the Basilica of Sainte-Clotilde in Paris from 1898 until his death in 1939. He was a student of César Franck and Charles-Marie Widor, organists who were progenitorial figures in the French symphonic organ school. His most renowned work was his L'Orgue Mystique. Written from 1927 to 1932, this work is a 15-hour, 253-movement piece written for 51 offices or masses of the Tridentine Roman Catholic tradition. Musically, these pieces are all based upon Gregorian chant, and by and large, they are tone poems based upon the pericope for each of these feasts. Today, I will be performing 3 pieces from the Epiphany season. In the modern liturgical calendar, with the exception of perhaps the beginning of Epiphany, this season, by and large, is considered to be a rather generic, ordinary time. However, in the old calendar, Epiphany Tide had a purpose-driven narrative focused upon the early Christological incarnational theophanies as realized through the life of Jesus of Nazareth. In today's recital, we'll be delving into 3 of these theophanies, although for musically aesthetic reasons, we will be taking them in reverse calendrical order. The theophanies that we are going to be looking at today deal with 3 genres of people: the prophets, those of the Jewish faith, and those of Gentile origin. So we're speaking of Epiphany as seen through the hopes of historic past generations and the contemporary experience of Jewish culture at that time, and the broader domain of humanity as a whole beyond the purview of the Jewish tradition. The first piece for today is the Diptyque for the Feast of Candlemas. Candlemas, which is also known as the Purification of the Virgin or the Presentation of Christ, occurs on February 2nd, or the 40th day of Christmas. In ancient tradition, after having given birth, Jewish women would present themselves at the temple in Jerusalem for an act of ritual purification. On the day that Mary was to do so, the Holy Family happened upon the prophet Simeon. This account speaks of Simeon as just and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel, and that it was revealed unto him by the Holy Ghost that he should not see death before he had seen the Lord's Christ. So in this story, when he comes upon the Holy Family, Simeon took the Christ child in his arms and spoke what is now known as the Nunc Dimittis. Lord, lettest thou thy servant depart in peace according to thy word. For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people, a light to lighten the Gentiles and the glory of thy people Israel. In this piece, you will hear Simeon hobbling through the temple with an eighth note, quarter note figuration in the feet, as a spiritually serene flute hovers aloft in a triplet pattern. Then, upon seeing Jesus, Simeon takes the Christ child into his arms, and the work swells to a joyous climax, only to recede as Simeon returns Jesus to his family. The hobbling theme then returns, this time ornamented with gentle elation, as the flute figuration alternates between a triplet and quadruplet pattern. There is a brilliant combination of ecstasy and melancholy in this work, for while Simeon has seen salvation, he is also going off to a corner of the temple to die embraced by divine quiescence. It is a brilliant work of biblical rendering that calls us all to an acute awareness and participation in divine realities, that the divine is both subtle and profound, and that it is a light which may only be perceived at the end of life's sojourn. So that said, here is the Diptyque for the Feast of Candlemas. The vast majority of movements from Charles Tournemire's Lord Mystique have a penchant for ending quietly with what, in essence, constitutes a musical ellipsis, as if anticipating continuation. Indeed, Tournemire's literary writings are peppered with hanging phrases, punctuated with ellipses, hoping that the reader would complete the thought or implying that there is more to be said that words cannot express. In a similar vein, there's a constant suggestion that there is more to be said about an idea in his music as well. This formula works well in a liturgical context during which there is a constant forward propulsion to the next idea. This sense of narrative propulsion is no more cogently demonstrated than in the Fantaisie-paraphrase for the second Sunday after the Epiphany, where we are presented with Christ's first miracle at the wedding in Cana. In this movement, we immediately encounter the decadent bacchanal of the wedding celebrations. Yet this tempestuous exuberance abruptly halts when it is noticed that the feast has come to the end of its supply of wine. Then, in stark and contrasting serene stillness, through Christ, the metamorphosis of the water transpires, ensuingly with what seems to be a casual insouciance. The festive revelries continue only to suddenly cease in the wake of disturbing epiphanous questions. What is the nature of this occurrence, and who is this man? Questions whose answers are yet to be revealed. That said, here is the Fantaisie-paraphrase for the second Sunday after the Epiphany. The final offering for today's program from Charles Tournemire's L'Orgue Mystique today is simply termed Fantaisie. This piece is the concluding movement from the office celebrating the feast of the Epiphany itself. Observed on January 6th, this festival commemorates the visitation of the Magi. The pieces from this office of L'Orgue Mystique rank as some of the most popular movements from the whole work for several reasons. First of all, the romantic and compelling subject matter of the Feast of the Epiphany is very appealing to many. And when one listens to Tournemire's rendering of this legendary account, aesthetically, the office as a whole has a satisfying musical form with a great deal of color, and then a grand concluding movement. Another reason for this particular movement's popularity, or the whole office's popularity, is due to the fact that the publication of this office for the Epiphany came relatively early in the grand scheme of things. While L'Orgue Mystique was written from 1927 to 1932, its publication was rather desultory due to the financial issues caused by the Great Depression. Publications spanned most of the 1930s, which meant that the work was finally available to the public in its entirety, just as Europe was gearing up for the Second World War. So many of the later movements failed to gain traction. The Office for the Epiphany, however, was published in 1929, and so it had a chance to be disseminated broadly before the onset of the war, which allowed this office the opportunity to receive contemporary performances. The final reason for its popularity is related to who promoted the work after Tournemire's death. With the completion of L'Orgue Mystique in 1932, Tournemire's student and close friend Daniel Lesueur organized a radio broadcast recital that took place on the 24th of April in 1932. Featuring the eminent organists of the next generation, Maurice Duruflé, André Fleury, Jean Langlais, Noélie Pierron, Gaston Litez, Daniel Lesueur, and Olivier Messiaen. The famous organist Jean Langlais, Tournemire's eventual successor at Sainte-Clotilde, played two movements from the Office for the Epiphany during this broadcast. Langlais was legally blind, so Tournemire himself penned a large print calligraphic score for Langlais to study. As a result, throughout his life, Langlais taught this office as a means of introducing his students to L'Orgue Mystique. So I'd like to thank you all very much for allowing me to share L'Orgue Mystique with you today. And of course, I would like to thank Abington Presbyterian Church and the Philadelphia chapter of the American Guild of Organists for hosting this Tuesday noontime series. So to conclude today's program, here is the Fantaisie for the Feast of the Epiphany.